Rory Hensley had lived on the outskirts of Westlove all his life, and he often said that the land knew him better than most people did. He woke up early, slept late, and rarely complained about anything except paperwork, which he believed existed only to torture ranchers. On this particular evening, he felt the exhaustion of the entire week sitting heavy on his shoulders. There were feed orders to update, fences to check, and a calf that had been sick since morning. He told himself he would rest tomorrow, but every rancher knew that tomorrow was a word used for comfort, not reality. As the sun dipped behind the rolling fields, an orange glow filled the sky. Rory watched the last light stretch across the land. Normally, this was his favorite time of day, the calm before the nighttime chores. But something felt different. The air was thick, as if the wind was holding its breath. Even the animals were uneasy. The horses shifted inside their stalls, and the cattle let out short, nervous sounds. Rory stepped onto the porch and studied the sky. The weather report had said nothing about a storm, but he knew better than to trust the forecast. Out here, weather had a mind of its own. A sudden gust of wind swept dust across the yard, and Rory shielded his eyes. Great, he muttered to himself. Just what I needed. A storm when I already got enough work. Chapped, he walked toward the barn, kicking at the dirt as he went. The temperature had dropped, and small vibrations traveled across the ground. The kind that signaled the wind was about to change direction. He tightened his jacket around his chest. The ranch lights flickered once before steadying again. Inside the barn, the sick calf lay on a bed of straw, breathing slowly but steadily. Rory knelt beside it, feeling its forehead and checking the bucket of water he had placed earlier. It was still drinking, which was a good sign. He whispered something reassuring before standing again. He had more work to do before the night took over completely. He grabbed a rope and headed out to check the barn doors. The wind pulled at them, making them rattle. Rory secured the hinges tightly, testing them with a firm tug. The storm might not hit hard, but he preferred not to take chances. He had seen what a loose door could do in strong wind, broken windows, injured animals, and long nights repairing what could have been avoided. As he stepped back, he heard the wind rise again, louder this time. Dust swirled across the open fields like small ghosts dancing in circles. Dry leaves flew past his boots, spinning wildly. Rory frowned. This was no ordinary wind. He turned toward the far end of the property, where the fence stretched along the boundary line in long, uneven rows. Something moved out there. At first, he thought it might be a stray cow, or perhaps a coyote searching for shelter. That would explain the animal's nervousness. But the shape was too large and too unsteady. It swayed as if trying to remain upright. Rory squinted, trying to make out the figure through the dust. The wind blew harder, stinging his eyes. He rubbed them, then looked again. The figure was closer now, but still blurred by the swirling air. "Who on earth is out there?" he whispered. It wasn't common for strangers to wander near his ranch. People in Westlove kept to themselves, and visitors usually announced their presence rather than show up unexpectedly. The nearest road was at least half a mile away. Anyone walking from there would have a reason or be in trouble. Rory started walking toward the fence, cautious but curious. The closer he got, the more his concern grew. The figure seemed to be stumbling, one step after another, as though tired or hurt. Something about the posture felt wrong. The person was tall, taller than most women he had met, but the way she moved made it clear she was struggling. The wind pushed against him, urging him to turn back, but he kept walking. The dust stung his cheeks, and his boots sank slightly into the dry patches of earth. Each step brought the figure more into focus. A thought crossed his mind. Whoever it was needed help. By the time he reached the fence, he could see her clearly. She was standing just a few feet beyond the wooden posts, wrapped clumsily in what looked like a large, torn blanket. Her hair was tangled and filled with dust, and her skin looked pale against the storm-dark sky. She had no shoes, and her feet were covered in dirt. Her clothes, if she had any, were not visible beneath the blanket. She hugged it tightly around herself as if trying to keep warm. Rory felt his heart sink a little. This woman had clearly been through something. She looked exhausted, frightened and confused, as if trying to make sense of where she was. The wind tugged at the blanket, threatening to pull it away from her. She grabbed it tighter, shaking slightly. He raised a hand and called out, keeping his voice calm so he wouldn't scare her. "Ma'am, are you all right?" At first, she didn't answer. She blinked several times as if trying to focus on his face. Then, she took a shaky breath. Rory could see that even speaking seemed to take effort. I didn't know where else to go," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind. Rory stepped closer, but not too close. He didn't want her to feel trapped or threatened. "You're on my ranch, but you're safe here. What happened? Are you hurt?" She nodded weakly, her knees trembling. "There was an accident. My truck. The storm." Her words faded as the wind carried them away. Rory immediately understood. The back road behind his property was known for being unpredictable. It curved sharply in some areas and dipped near loose patches of gravel. If the storm hit while she was driving, it might have startled her or pushed her vehicle off the main path. He softened his expression, trying to reassure her. "Let's get you inside. This wind is getting worse." The woman hesitated, glancing around as if unsure whether to trust him. Rory didn't push her. He simply extended a hand, not too far, just enough to show he was offering help, not forcing it. After a long moment, she nodded again. She took one small step forward, then another, but her legs gave out beneath her. Rory caught her gently before she fell, supporting her weight carefully. The blanket slipped slightly, and she clutched it again, embarrassed. "It's all right," he said softly. "We'll get you warm and safe." She didn't reply, but she leaned against him, letting him guide her. Together, they moved slowly toward the house. The wind made each step harder, but Rory kept his pace steady. She was tall and strong-looking, but exhaustion had taken hold of her body. As they reached the porch, he felt her shiver. The temperature had dropped even more, and she was clearly cold. He opened the door and led her inside, where warm air and soft light filled the room. The house was simple but welcoming: wooden floors, a stone fireplace, and shelves filled with ranching tools and old books. She looked around weakly, as if unsure she belonged in a place that felt so safe after whatever she had been through. "Sit down right here," Rory said, guiding her to a chair near the fireplace. "I'll get you something warm to drink." She nodded slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. Her breathing was uneven, and Rory could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She looked like she had been walking for a long time, maybe since the truck accident. He quickly heated water on the stove and made her a cup of warm tea. When he handed it to her, she held the cup in both hands, letting the steam warm her fingers before taking a small sip. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're welcome," Rory replied. He sat in the chair across from her. "My name is Rory. What's yours?" She hesitated again, but only for a second. "Mara," she said quietly. "Mara Ellison." Rory nodded gently. "You're safe now, Mara." Outside, the wind continued to howl, rattling the windows. The storm wasn't finished yet, but inside the ranch house, warmth and safety wrapped around the room like a protective coat. Rory didn't know what kind of night he was in for, but he sensed it would be a long one. And he was right. Mara sat quietly near the fireplace while Rory moved around the kitchen, giving her space but staying close enough to help if she needed anything. The warm tea had brought a little color back to her face, but she still looked tired, shaken, and unsure of her surroundings. The blanket around her was worn and dusty, and every now and then she pulled it tighter, as if she feared losing even that small bit of warmth. Rory didn't ask any questions too quickly. He knew that when someone had gone through something frightening, they needed time to breathe. The storm outside continued to rattle against the windows. The wind made long, low sounds across the yard, and the old wooden porch creaked every time a heavy gust hit it. Rory kept glancing toward the window to make sure nothing had blown loose, but he didn't want to leave Mara alone long enough to check everything. She looked like she might faint if she stood up too fast. After a few quiet minutes, Mara finally spoke again. Her voice was soft but clearer than before. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," she said without lifting her eyes from the steaming cup in her hands. "I didn't mean to bother anyone. I didn't know where else to go." "You're not bothering me," Rory said gently. "Anyone in your situation would need help. I'm glad you found your way here instead of staying out in that wind." Mara nodded but didn't look fully convinced. People like her, Rory thought, were used to taking care of themselves. Asking for help didn't come easy. He respected that. He pulled a thick jacket from the coat rack and placed it on the back of her chair. "If you get cold, put this on," he said. "It's clean and warm." She looked at the jacket, then at him, her eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you. I will." Rory took a seat again, resting his hands on his knees. "When you're ready," he said softly, "you can tell me what happened. But only if you feel comfortable." "There's no hurry." Mara took a small breath, then another. Her fingers tightened around the cup. For a moment Rory thought she might stay silent. But slowly, she began to speak. "I was driving the delivery route," she said. "My husband. He passed away a few months ago. I've been finishing the deliveries he never got to complete." She paused, as if gathering strength. "Today I was taking some of his things to his brother's place. It's a few towns away." Rory nodded, listening without interrupting. "I didn't expect the weather to change so fast," she continued. "The sky was clear when I left. But when I reached the back road near here, everything happened so quickly. The wind pushed against the truck, and dust started covering the windshield. I couldn't see the road properly." She looked down at her hands, remembering. "I slowed down. But the truck still slipped to the side. It hit a patch of loose gravel and spun out. I tried to climb out and check the damage, but the storm got worse. Something must have torn my clothes when I crawled through the broken door. I didn't even notice until the wind hit me." Rory sat straighter in his seat, concern deepening but careful not to show alarm. She didn't need more worry. She needed calm. "How far did you walk?" he asked gently. "I don't know," she whispered. "Maybe an hour. Maybe more." Everything looked the same in the dust. My phone wouldn't work. I couldn't see any lights, and the wind kept pulling at me. Her voice trembled. "I thought I was going to collapse before I found anyone." Rory felt a knot in his chest. She must have been terrified. Wandering alone with no shoes and nothing but that blanket keeping her warm. "You did well," he said with comforting firmness. "You kept moving. That takes strength." Mara looked up for a moment, meeting his eyes. "I wasn't sure if I had any strength left," she said. "But when I saw your ranch lights, I hoped someone would be home. And you were right," Rory replied with a small smile. "You came to the right place." The fire crackled softly in the background, warming the atmosphere. The tension that had filled the room when she arrived began to fade, replaced with a quieter, gentler feeling. Mara loosened the blanket just enough to sip her tea again, curling her feet under the chair for comfort. Rory stood up after a moment. "I'm going to get you something else to drink, maybe some warm soup if you want it." "That would be nice," she said shyly. He went into the kitchen again and warmed a pot of vegetable soup he had made earlier in the week. While it heated, he kept an eye on her, making sure she didn't look dizzy or in pain. She sat still but seemed more aware now, as if the room felt safer with every passing minute. When he brought the bowl to her, she held it gently, breathing in the warm smell. "This reminds me of home," she said quietly. "Good," Rory answered. "Home is a good thing to remember." She ate slowly at first, then with more confidence. The color in her cheeks returned even more, and her shoulders relaxed slightly. After finishing, she let out a long breath that seemed to release some invisible weight she had been carrying. Rory waited until she seemed comfortable again before asking the next question. "Do you think you're hurt anywhere? Any pain in your legs or arms?" She shook her head. "Just tired. My feet are sore from walking without shoes. But I don't think anything is broken." "Good," he said. "If it's all right with you, I'll check the first aid kit later." and see if you need anything for the bruises." "That's fine," she said softly. The storm outside continued, but inside the house time felt slower, calmer. Mara looked around at the shelves, the tools neatly arranged, the warm lights that flickered against the wooden walls. It was clear she hadn't been in a place this peaceful in a long time. Rory sat across from her again. "Mara," he said gently, "I know tonight has been difficult, but you're safe here. You can stay as long as you need until the storm calms, until you feel steady, or until help arrives. There's no pressure." Her eyes softened, and her voice grew emotional. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Rory assured her. "Helping people isn't something that needs payment." She nodded, and the room fell into a comfortable silence. For the first time since she had arrived, Mara seemed to let herself relax. Her breathing slowed, her shoulders lowered, and her eyes softened with relief. After a while she asked, "Do you think someone will find the truck? Once the storm settles?" "We'll call for help," Rory said. "Or I can drive out there and see what I can do. But for now, let's focus on you feeling better." She nodded again, her eyes growing heavy. The exhaustion she had been holding back began to show. Rory noticed and stood up quietly. "You look tired," he said softly. "If you want, I can set up the guest room for you." Mara hesitated, almost embarrassed. "I don't want to trouble you." "You're not troubling me," he said with gentle firmness. "You shouldn't be sitting up all night. Rest will help you recover." She finally agreed with a small nod. Rory led her slowly down the hallway, staying close in case she stumbled. The guest room was simple. A neatly made bed, a small lamp on a wooden table, and a soft quilt folded at the foot. He turned on the lamp, filling the room with warm light. "You can sleep here," he said. "If you need anything, I'll be in the next room." Mara stepped inside, looking at the bed like it was the most welcoming thing she had seen in days. "Thank you," she said again, her voice full of quiet sincerity. "Rest well," Rory said, stepping back so she could have privacy. As he walked away, he heard her gently close the door. The storm outside roared, but inside, peace settled over the house. Rory stood for a moment in the hallway, letting out a long breath. He knew this night would be long, but he didn't mind. Helping someone in need wasn't a burden, it was what any decent person would do. He returned to the living room, stirred the fire, and glanced toward the guest room. The house felt different now. Not empty the way it usually did at night. It felt like his quiet home had found someone who needed its warmth just as much as he needed company. He whispered to himself, almost smiling, "Tonight is going to be long." But he didn't say it with worry. He said it with purpose. Rory didn't sleep that night. He didn't even try. After settling Mara into the guest room, he returned to the living room and kept the small lamp on, listening to the storm outside. The wind continued to press against the windows, and every now and then, a soft whistle passed through the cracks, reminding him how unpredictable weather could be in Westlove. But his mind wasn't on the storm anymore. It was on the mysterious widow sleeping just a few steps away, exhausted, cold, and far away from anything familiar. He sat near the fire, poking the logs gently until the flames rose again. The glow filled the room with calm light. But even the calm couldn't quiet his thoughts. He wondered about her truck, about her long walk in the cold wind, and about the sadness he had seen in her eyes. It was the kind of sadness that didn't come from one difficult moment. It was the kind that had been carried for months, maybe longer. After about an hour, Rory finally heard movement. Soft footsteps touched the hallway floor, and he stood up immediately. Turning toward the sound, Mara stepped into the room slowly, still wrapped in the blanket. Her hair was slightly brushed now, and her face looked calmer. But she still appeared tired. She gave a small, apologetic smile when she saw him. "Did I wake you?" she asked quietly. Rory shook his head. "No. I wasn't sleeping." "You feeling all right?" "I'm better," she said, though her voice carried a slight tremble. "I tried to rest, but my mind kept thinking about everything." He understood. After a day like hers, Sleep didn't come easily. He gestured toward the chair near the fire. Come sit. It's warmer here. She nodded and walked over, taking a seat slowly. The heat from the fire touched her face, relaxing her shoulders a little. She held the blanket around her like a shield, but her expression was open. Thank you, she said softly, for everything tonight. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't found your ranch. I'm glad you did, Rory replied, sitting across from her. Anyone would have helped. Mara gave a small smile. Maybe, but it feels like people are too busy for strangers most of the time. Or they don't want to get involved. Well, Rory said with a shrug, I wasn't doing much besides worrying about paperwork. Her smile widened just a little. It was the first true smile he'd seen from her, and it softened her tired features. The room grew quiet again, but not uncomfortable. It was a gentle silence, the kind that felt safe. After a moment, Mara took a deep breath, as if preparing herself. I haven't really talked to anyone in a long time, she said, her eyes lowering to her hands. Since my husband passed. I mean, everything changed so fast. I didn't know how to handle it. Rory leaned back slightly, giving her the space to speak without pressure. He could tell she needed someone to listen. She continued. He was a truck driver too. We used to work together. We traveled from town to town, delivering things. It wasn't an easy job, but we liked it. We were together all the time, and that made the long road feel shorter. She paused, taking in a slow breath. When he got sick, everything stopped. I stayed with him through all of it, hoping he would get better. But one day, he just didn't. The emotional weight of her words hung in the air. Gentle, but heavy. She didn't cry, but her voice softened with the kind of sadness that didn't need tears to be understood. Rory spoke quietly. I'm really sorry you went through that, Mara nodded. After he passed, I didn't know what to do with myself. I kept driving. It was the only thing that still made sense. His deliveries were still scheduled, so I finished them. I guess it was my way of holding on to him, even if it was in small pieces. She looked into the fire, watching the flames move. Today's delivery was the last one. His personal belongings, things he kept in the truck. His brother has been waiting for them. And I wanted to finish what he started. Rory listened carefully, understanding more of her strength with every word she said. It wasn't easy for a person to carry so much heartache and still move forward. You're stronger than you think, he said softly. She shook her head gently. I don't feel strong. I feel tired. Tired in a way that sleep can't fix. Rory understood that kind of tiredness. A tiredness that came from the heart, not the body. He didn't try to fix it with quick comfort. Instead, he simply said, You've been carrying a lot alone. Mara looked at him. Her eyes filled with a soft sadness. Yes, she whispered. I didn't know how to share it with anyone. People want you to move on. But they don't understand that moving on doesn't mean forgetting. Her words were honest and clear, and they touched something deep inside Rory. He wasn't a man who talked much about feelings, but he understood loneliness. He understood how life could feel too heavy for one person. The fire crackled, breaking the silence. After a few moments, Rory stood and walked to the kitchen. You want something warm to drink? Tea? Maybe hot milk? Oh, hot milk sounds nice, she said. He warmed a small pot on the stove while she sat quietly, watching him. When he returned and handed her the mug, she held it with both hands, taking in the warmth. This helps, she said. It feels comforting. They sat again, letting the fire keep the room bright. Outside, the storm began to soften. The wind's roar turned into a softer whistle, and the shaking of the windows slowed. The worst of it had passed. Mara looked toward the window. It's calming down. Yeah, Rory said. By morning, we should have clear skies again. She nodded slowly. I don't want to leave as soon as the storm ends. Not until I know I can breathe again. You can stay as long as you need, Rory assured her. This house is quiet, but it's safe. Thank you, she whispered. The two of them sat quietly after that. And the quiet was peaceful, not heavy. Mara sipped her warm drink. Rory leaned back in his chair, letting the fire warm his hands. The moment felt like a small pause in both their lives, a place where neither of them had to rush or hide anything. After some time, Mara spoke again. You live alone? Rory nodded. Always have. Ranch keeps me busy enough. Never really had time to think about anything else. She looked around. It feels like a good home. It is, he said. Just gets quiet sometimes. Quiet isn't always bad, she said. Sometimes, quiet is what a person needs. Rory smiled at that. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Her eyelids began to droop again, and she set the mug down. She was still tired, still fragile from everything she had been through. Rory stood up and walked with her back toward the guest room. She paused at the doorway. Thank you for listening, she said softly. Anytime, he replied. Go rest. Morning will look better. She nodded and stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. Rory stood in the hallway for a long moment, letting out a slow breath. He felt a mixture of worry for her and respect for her strength. He knew the road ahead would still be difficult for her, but at least she wasn't walking it alone tonight. He returned to the living room, added a few more logs to the fire, and sat down again. He listened to the calmer wind outside and thought about Mara's journey, how losing someone could leave a person wandering, searching for meaning, searching for direction. And he thought about how sometimes two paths crossed at the exact moment they needed to. He whispered to himself quietly, Tonight is long, but it doesn't feel as heavy anymore. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know how the rest of Mara's story would unfold. But he knew one thing for certain. He was glad she had found his ranch. And he was glad to be the one to help her tonight. The morning arrived quietly, as if the storm had worked through the night and finally tired itself out. The first light of dawn slipped through the windows, soft and pale, spreading across the wooden floor like a gentle reminder that even difficult nights eventually pass. Rory woke up in the armchair where he had dozed off, still wrapped in a blanket he had pulled over himself sometime before sunrise. The fire had burned down to warm embers, and the room carried a faint smell of smoke and tea. He stretched slowly, rubbing his eyes. His back felt stiff from sleeping upright, but he didn't mind. He immediately listened for sounds coming from the hallway. Everything was silent. He wondered if Mara was still asleep. After everything she had been through, she needed the rest. He stood up quietly and walked to the window. Outside, the sky was clear. The wind was gone, and everything looked washed fresh. The trees stood still, the ground sparkled with leftover moisture, and the barn looked untouched. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, the world had felt so wild and unsettled. Rory boiled some water and made himself a cup of coffee. He didn't want to make too much noise, but he knew that the smell of breakfast might make the house feel more welcoming. He cracked a few eggs into a pan, sliced some bread, and put it in the toaster. Simple food, but warm and comforting. As he moved around the kitchen, the sound of footsteps reached his ears. Slow, careful footsteps, as if the person walking wasn't sure if they should be up yet. He turned around just as Mara appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. She looked a little stronger than she had the night before. Her hair was brushed, and she had wrapped the blanket around her shoulders neatly. Her face was still tired, but there was softness in her eyes that hadn't been there the previous evening. Good morning, she said quietly. Morning, Rory replied with a warm smile. Did you sleep all right? She nodded. Better than I expected. I thought my mind would keep me awake, but the room felt peaceful. I'm glad, he said. Breakfast will be ready in a minute. Hope you're hungry. I am, she said with a small smile. I didn't realize how much energy I had lost yesterday. He placed a plate on the table and motioned toward the seat. Mara sat down slowly, taking in the smell of the warm food. Her shoulders relaxed as she took her first bite. This is good, she said. It feels like home. Thank you, Rory said, sitting across from her. "You need a real meal after everything." They ate quietly for a few minutes, comfortable in the silence. Outside, the sun rose higher, filling the kitchen with gold light. The storm felt like a distant memory now, almost unreal compared to the peaceful morning. After a while, Mara set her fork down and looked at Rory. "I think I need to figure out what to do next," she said softly. "The truck, I don't know what condition it's in, and I still need to get my husband's things to his brother. We can check the truck as soon as you're ready," Rory offered. "The back road shouldn't be flooded." The storm was mostly wind and dust. She nodded, taking a breath. "Thank you. I don't want to trouble you any more than I already have." "You're not troubling me," he said with gentle firmness. "You're handling a lot. Helping you is the least I can do." She looked down, touched by his kindness. "Most people wouldn't do as much." "Maybe," Rory said. "But that doesn't mean they shouldn't." After breakfast, Rory grabbed his truck keys and 2 jackets, one for him, one for her. She took the jacket without argument this time, sliding it on slowly. It hung a little loose on her, but it was warm and soft. They stepped outside together. The air was cool and refreshing after the storm. The ground felt firm under their feet, and the sky stretched clear above them. Rory drove the truck down the gravel path that led to the back road. Mara sat quietly beside him, holding the blanket in her lap and staring out the window. Every now and then, her fingers tightened slightly, as if remembering the fear she had felt the night before. He didn't rush her or ask questions. He simply drove, keeping the ride steady. After a few minutes, they found the spot where the road curved sharply. There, half hidden behind a cluster of bushes and branches, was Mara's truck. It was tilted slightly, but not destroyed. One side was scraped, and the door was stuck partly open. Dust covered the inside, but it looked repairable. Mara let out a long breath. "I'm glad it's still here," she said softly. Rory parked and stepped out to take a closer look. "It's not too bad," he said. "Engine might be fine. We can call for a tow truck now that the storm is over." "No one stole anything," Mara added quietly as she checked the back. "That's a relief." She opened the door gently and pulled out a small box, wrapped in a cloth. She held it with both hands, treating it with deep care. "These are his things," she said softly. "I've been protecting this box since the day he passed." Rory nodded respectfully. "You did a good job keeping it safe." Mara stood still for a moment, holding the box close. The morning light touched her face, revealing a mixture of sadness and strength. She looked like someone who had finally reached the end of a long journey but wasn't sure what came next. "Do you want to go to your husband's brother today?" Rory asked gently. She hesitated, thinking carefully. "I think I do," she finally said. "It's time. Holding onto this box has been important, but giving it to his family is the last thing I promised him." "Then I'll drive you," Rory said without hesitation. Her eyes widened slightly. "You don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted gently. "And you don't need to drive alone after everything that happened." Mara looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you." They left the truck where it was, planning to call a tow service later. For now, the box was what mattered most. Back at the ranch, Mara freshened up with the clothes Rory had offered her the night before. When she came back into the living room, she looked more grounded, more steady. She seemed ready. Rory loaded his truck, and they started the drive toward her brother-in-law's home. The road was quiet, the sunlight warm, and the fields stretched wide on both sides. Mara held the box carefully in her lap, her fingers tracing the edges. She occasionally looked out the window, lost in memories, but she didn't look as weighed down as before. After about an hour, they reached the small house where her husband's brother lived. It was a simple place with a well-kept garden. When the door opened, her brother-in-law stepped out, his expression softening when he saw Mara. "Mara?" he said gently. She nodded. "I brought his things," she said, holding out the box. He took it with both hands, his eyes misty with emotion. "Thank you. I know this wasn't easy." "It was the last thing he wanted," she whispered. Her brother-in-law hugged her gently, and Mara finally allowed herself to let go of the sorrow she had been holding inside. She didn't break down. She didn't cry loudly. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the quiet relief wash over her. Rory stayed back, giving them space. He watched quietly, feeling grateful that she had found closure. After a few minutes, Mara returned to him. Her eyes were calmer, clearer, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She took a deep breath. "I needed this," she said softly. "I'm glad," Rory replied. They said goodbye to her husband's brother and drove back toward Westlove. The sky was bright now, and the land seemed full of open possibilities. Halfway back, Mara turned to Rory. "I don't know what comes next," she said honestly, "but I feel lighter." "That's a good start," Rory said with a gentle smile. "You've helped me more than you know," she added. "I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough." "You already have," he said. "You trusted me." She looked at him, and for the first time since they met, her eyes didn't hold fear or uncertainty. They held peace. When they reached the ranch, Mara stood outside for a moment, taking in the quiet land. The air felt warm, and the sky was wide and open. She turned to Rory with a soft smile. "I think I'd like to stay in Westlove for a little while," she said. "Just until I figure out my plans." "You're welcome here anytime," Rory said sincerely. "Then maybe tonight won't be as long as last night," she said with a light laugh. Rory smiled. "Maybe. But even if it is, we'll handle it." Together, they walked toward the house, the storm behind them, the future open, calm, and full of gentle